Aloha, what's up everybody? Welcome to today's presentation where we're going to be talking about space. What is space? Is space fake? Is space real? Especially the concept of space within alternative cosmologies. That's really what I'm going to be focusing on today. Huge shout out to Sarah Smith, the first person I saw in the chat today. Congratulations for showing up first today. Good to see everybody else in the chat who's coming in now. What's up, everyone? Hey, I see everybody jumping into the chat. It's good to see so many people. So I have an alternative cosmology, all right? Mine's a little different than many people's. I like to see cosmology as the blind men who are all touching different parts of the elephant and describing it in different ways. So one man touches the legs and he believes it's a tree. Another person touches the tail, he believes it's a snake. Another person touches the trunk, etc., and so on and so forth. I feel that all the cosmologies that I have studied so far have elements and grains of truth. So that's where I'll be coming from today. I'm not coming from any absolute position, nor am I trying to convince anyone of my own views. I'm simply here to share them with you. So, I believe there is a dome over the earth. I believe in the age-old quintessential firmament. I believe that that firmament is made out of ice, and I believe it acts as the ceiling to the surface of our world. So, I'm going to be sharing some images with you guys, some pictures, and wow, check that out. Phil is in the chat and just gave 10 JayDreamerZ channel memberships. High five to you, Phil. And congratulations to everybody who's going to be picking those up. So today we're going to be discussing propulsion in space. How does that work? What does that look like within the academic concept and the academic cosmology and theory, which is what I believe that all of academics is just a bunch of widely accepted or imposed theories. They're really imposed upon the people through the school systems. And all of the following will be my own perspective, my own research, my own thoughts, ideas, etc. Man, it's good to see so many people getting channel memberships. What's up? Carmen Smith, what's up? I see you in the chat. High five. Thanks for being my therapist the other day. Appreciate you. All right, cool. So, space. Let me get my pictures pulled up here, and we're gonna cycle through some of these here. Okay, cool. So this is more of like my cosmology. These are just going to be simple images, just to give you an idea. This is a typical cosmology with the dome above it and everything, but it doesn't include the underworld. That's a huge part of my own cosmology, is what is connected to the bottom part, what is underneath this. I don't think it's just a disc and it's just, totally flat, there's nothing underneath it or whatever. I believe there are roots that grow down under the earth, okay? I've shown many examples of that in the past. I also believe that there is what I call a fractal verse up here beyond the dome, and that all of these different earths and all these different worlds are actually connected through the root system that goes off into other earths and other worlds and stuff, much like a neural network, much like the synapses and neurons that exist within your very own brain. But that is not the topic for today. Today's topic is going to be focusing on the space that exists between the firmament itself and the surface where we live. That is what I believe space is. Now, it's more complicated, it's more in-depth than that, but that's simply put, we call that space. Space is what exists between two physical objects, typically, right? So, if we have a physical object being the firmament or the dome of the earth, and we have another physical object being the surface world where we live, then space is the atmosphere above us. And that atmosphere acts differently the higher up you go into it. So I'm going to share my cosmology, my view on what space is, why I don't believe that space is 100% fake, but I do believe that the government agencies, especially that known as NASA, which is your local government, here in the United States at least, they do fake some things. They do add to. They color it, they splash it. The concept of quote unquote space. So let me start with this. I believe, because there is a firmament, that our world is dark. Okay, we live during the age of night, a grand night time. And we go through cycles of daytime when the earth releases geoplasmas that light up the firmament. It lights up the heavens, and the heavens are lit up from below, which reflect the land below, so that people can look up at the firmament and actually see a reflection of the greater world at large, so that ancient cartographers could map out the entire world without ever having to really leave home. You know, and they could just discuss with other cartographers in different parts of the world what they see when they look up into the sky or at the actual firmament itself. And I also believe that whenever people look up at the stars, which I have my own, and you know, I'll probably open this up to questions and answers at the end of the presentation, because it's in depth, and I do well when people ask me direct questions. But when people look up at the darkness which exists under the covering, which is the dome, and they see little points of focus, which we call stars, that it's like a magic eye, and their imagination wanders, and they look through it and beyond it, and they start imagining that there are planets and worlds, because they know that they are out there. They know that they exist. They know that they just intuitively feel there has to be more than just life here on the surface world locally where we live. And I believe that there's some truth to that. But I like to reconcile and merge these concepts together to get, you know, to bring together these different puzzle pieces to make a bigger picture. Okay? So this is our basic concept of space. Academically speaking, we've got a gigantic sun off to the side over there. It's very heliocentric, right? Everything moves around the sun, which is in opposition to what I experience. My very own eyes. I look up and I see the sun, which I call the focal point, moving around in circles above our world. Same thing with the moon, same thing with the stars, same thing with comets and all these things. They all move generally in the same direction above our head, spinning around us, not us spinning around them. That's my perspective on that. We also have these projections that are known as planets. I believe that they are not planets. I don't believe that they are physical bodies. I believe that they are what the Bible refers to as luminaries. They're lights in the sky. The planets themselves are projections. Hey, I got a donation from Furious TV, who says another sign is stream platforms like Kick, bringing back public participative human sacrificial rituals that go along the defilement of the sacred. Yes, very nice. That is that sounds like an omen of the apocalypse to me. Thank you so much, Furious. All right, cool. So this is your typical solar system as academics presents it, okay? Now, keep in mind, I believe we live in an upside-down world where everything has been reversed in what I call the season of Satan. It's just a polarity shift where we switch from left brain to right brain, and everything's sort of the upside down of reality as I perceive it, okay? All right, cool. Let's move on to this next picture here. Now, I think that all these things exist under the dome. I think that they can exist and do exist under the dome itself. I'm going to get to propulsion here in just a bit, but I really want to focus on this right here, okay? So we're going to focus. Thank you so much. Love you.
Love you too.
All right, we're going to focus today on how things can float in the sky under the dome, because that's a huge one, right? If we do live under a dome, if we do live under a firmament, is it possible that things can float up there in the heavens? I'm going to share with you my theory on how that is possible, and how whenever NASA and Elon Musk and SpaceX and, you know, the space agencies that are just up there in the space between the dome and the earth, when they're shooting their rockets up there and they're going up there, how it's possible that they can actually float around, how it's possible that there can be rocks and debris and satellites and other things that actually float around. And I'll share that with you today. Let's see. So let's see. Where do I want to start off here? Let's talk about propulsion real quick. Okay. So this is an image of a rocket that's up there in outer space, or low Earth orbit, as they say, right? The concept of low Earth orbit is interesting to me, okay? It's basically when you go up beyond the Kármán line, which is, you know, about 50, 60 miles-ish, up, straight up, not too far away. It's an hour drive. If you could just drive straight up, you would drive right into space after going 60 miles an hour for about an hour, right? You'd hit the Kármán line and you'd start floating, hypothetically, right? So in academics, they will tell us that the atmosphere just kind of thins out. It kind of dissolves, and that gravity is holding in all of these gases, but releases some of them. When it comes to academics and their theory of gravitational pull or gravity, it's very picky. It picks and it chooses. It can hold in 5 quintillion pounds of atmosphere, but releases a cloud or a helium balloon. And then all of a sudden, the academics will shift their focus to the most important thing of all, which is discussing buoyancy and density and how these things work with each other. And all of a sudden, oh, gravity is weak. It's just a weak force. But it's holding down 5 quintillion pounds of atmosphere, of gases. Something's wrong with that, okay? There's a disconnect in that logic. So we're taught that, you know, whenever the astronauts go up into space, that all they have to do is use Newton's third law, which is for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Keep in mind, Newton allegedly came up with these laws, and his perspective, his application is on Earth. Yeah. They didn't have NASA or space travel or, you know, within the vacuum of anything out, you know, during this time. Okay. So the equal and opposite thing applies to conditions here on the Earth. What am I saying? I'm saying that if you change the condition, the law changes. All right. So if you have a vacuum, let's say it's a perfect vacuum, which I know people will then start to move the goalpost and they'll say, well, space isn't a perfect vacuum or whatever. Okay. We're still going to go with the vacuum. They will say that the gases release from the rocket. Okay. It could be a spritz of air. Pss, 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 pss. It could be, you know, an explosion or whatever. And because of that action, there's an equal and opposite reaction where the gases, because they're released, push the rocket in the opposite direction. That is applicable within atmospheric conditions, not within a vacuum. Okay? Here's my reasoning behind that. Because if this is a perfect vacuum, space and that vacuum will happily receive whatever is released from within this rocket. There will be nothing to push against. There can be no push unless you're pushing against something. What they will then say is, well, the gases are pushing against themselves, which is illogical. If I'm standing in the middle of an ice rink wearing ice skates and I want to move myself, I cannot push myself and skate around the ice, okay? I also can't just push the air and expect to just start moving and skate around the ice. I need to push against something, okay? So, I believe that that's established. Now, what does that mean? If there are rockets, if there is an international space station, if there are things up there within the space that exists between the dome and the surface world, and they are using propulsion, then they are pushing against atmosphere. That there is actually some sort of atmosphere which exists in the form of gas. And I will show you how this can work within my own alternative cosmological model or view. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to come back to that in a bit because I'm actually going to need to draw out some stuff for you guys to look at. All right. So here's the heliocentric model where we've got this gigantic fireball in negative 400 or 500 degrees of space, and it's just really hot. Here's the Great Rift. Here's the Milky Way. You can see up there. It's called the Great Rift. Because it's a tear in the firmament. Okay, it's a scar on the actual dome of ice that is above us. It's where the dome has opened up in the past. Here it is again. Goodness gracious, great balls of fire. Right? And you've got these ball planets and stuff. You know, this whole topic could be about, you know, the strange formation of space balls. Comets as well. So comets can exist under the dome, under the firmament. They are not slushies. They are not snowballs from space. It doesn't even make any sense because they would disintegrate, right? Like this tail right here consists of debris from the comet itself, which stretches for like 500 million miles. Take all that debris, put it right back to where it was, and that's not going to be that big. That's going to be that big, or possibly even that big over there. So the academic model when it comes to comets and stuff doesn't make any sense to me. I believe that what we see in our sky is often a result of optics, and that the dome, the firmament, acts as a glass-type lens. It acts as an optical lens, and light passes through it from the heavens beyond and gives us a display in our sky up above, right? Comets are what are known as chromatic aberrations, which means that the light that passes through the dome has hit an anomaly on the dome itself, causing those light rays to refract and not create a perfect star or a perfect focal point. And therefore, they become out of focus and they leave a trail or a coma, which is really what it's called. And that's where we get the term comet from. It is a coma. It is a chromatic aberration, which is an optical effect. And here's what people look at when they look up and they use the magic eye effect and they believe that they're, you know, this is three-dimensional and they can just travel through it forever and ever, instead of realizing that there is a wall. Okay, there is a barrier, there's a ceiling, and these are all little points of focus which stem from anomalies on the dome in the form of craters on one side or domes, mini domes on the other side, okay? The light passes through those and it creates little suns or little points of focus. They are way up high, way higher than the sun itself, which is under the dome as well. So here would be a rocket ship. Now they're using propulsion on the ground because they can, because they're pushing against all of this atmosphere that's down here on the ground. They're going about a mile up into the sky, or I'm sorry, 60 miles up into the sky or whatever it is, up to where they're able to float. And I will share with you, I will actually draw it out how they can actually float. They can float up there. There's a reason why they have to have this special equipment. And it has a lot to do with the pressure that exists in that particular region of the space that exists between the dome and the surface world. Here's the moon way back there. Personally, I do not believe the moon is a rock. I don't believe it has ever been described as a rock within antiquity, but that it is a light. It is a projection of a portion of the dome that reflects our world. Okay, and if you look closely and you study things like the moon map, which we will probably get into here pretty soon in the coming days, you can see that the moon is reflecting the Earth, or at least a portion thereof, right? So we have projections like the moon and planets, and we have points of focus like the stars and the sun. The sun is the largest point of focus. The light passing through and meeting at a point, and then redistributing that light down onto the surface where we live, giving us starlight or daytime. So I really want to focus today on floating in space, floating in the sky, which is, you know, anything above us is just basically sky. Okay, it's atmosphere. It's the space between us and the dome itself. There's different portions to it, though, different parts of it, and this is why I believe that objects can actually float when you get high and up enough into the sky. These are interesting too. These are called dark nebulas, right? Where there's just no light. And it's supposed to be all these gases and they're like blocking stuff according to the academic model. I just think that these are newer portions of the dome, which is, I believe, made out of ice, which don't have all these instabilities and stuff on them, craters and stuff, to create these points of focus. And what we're seeing is portions of the dome. Like, for example, this would be fresh ice. right? With no craters in it, no domes or anything on the firmament itself. And so the light passes through and it doesn't create any stars. It doesn't create any focal points or anything like that. It's just darkness. And here's again where the dome was ripped open. And I've got another example here too. You can see the Milky Way, right? There's a lot of milk symbolism when it comes to space, like the moon being made out of cheese and the Milky Way, and even the word galaxy itself is related to this. Here's the Milky Way. When you stretch it out, it creates a dome, interestingly enough. And I imagine it would just circle on around and create a circle, which I believe is the scarring of what I call the apex dome. And I believe that there is an apex, or a top portion of the firmament. The firmament comes up like a bowl over the earth, but then at the apex, it dips inward like an eye that is constantly looking down at us. Every other cycle, people can see that eye because the geoplasmas that erupt from the earth in these pillars and beams act like flashlights that light up the firmament. People can see that dipping, or that apex dome, and every cycle that apex dome breaks off, falls down like Humpty Dumpty, which is exactly what that is. And it crashes and it creates icebergs around the Arctic Circle. But then this is where it heals up. Okay, that is the outer edge, possibly, of the apex dome. That's my theory on that. So here you have like some people in the ISS floating and stuff. A lot of people believe that this is 100% fake and that it can't be real or anything. I think it's possible. I have seen many videos where they definitely look faked. But just because one looks faked, I can't logically conclude that they are all faked, especially if I believe that it's a possibility for people to actually float in the sky when you get up high enough. One thing I do recognize in the faces of these astronauts is it looks almost like they're upside, like if you stand upside down or you do a handstand, all the blood kind of rushes to your face and like you could just tell there's a lot of pressure. And I think that's crucial. Just the way they look, it seems like there's a lot of pressure on them. You know what I mean? When they're up there floating around and stuff. It's interesting. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm sure that there are studios and there are wires and stuff from time to time. But is it possible to send a person up high into the sky and have them float? And is there a correlation between those people that may do that and this? It looks like they're like holding their breath, or like there's a lot of pressure, or you know what I mean? Like maybe blood pressure. I don't know what it is. But anyways, here's the ISS. Here's a space shuttle docking with it and stuff high above the Earth. This is not too far away. Keep this in mind. It's only 60 miles straight up. That's an hour drive. That's not far away whatsoever. They will tell you it's low Earth orbit. And I'll share with you my theories on that. Here's these spritzes of air or gases, so that they can move about. If they can move about and spritz that gas, listen, if they're in the vacuum of space, this cannot happen, like I established earlier. Okay, I know they'll say, well, you just don't get it. They use circular reasoning. They keep repeating themselves. They go in circles. They talk in circles. This cannot happen in a vacuum of space. Space will happily and eagerly pull that gas out. There will be nothing to push against. Okay, so you cannot have propulsion in a vacuum like this. That's my perspective, and that seems logical to me. But if you're in the atmosphere still, you sure can. And you know what else is interesting? In recent years, they've been saying that the moon is within the Earth's atmosphere, that somehow the Earth's atmosphere extends all the way out 200,000 miles to the moon. I think that there's just truth to that the moon is actually in the Earth's atmosphere. It's under the dome. Here's another one where they're showing you little propulsions, and they're moving around up there, right? I'm going to explain to you why I believe this is possible and how it's possible within my cosmological view of a dome, a firmament, over the plane of the Earth that we live on. So with that, let me go ahead and switch over to my screen capturing. And I will begin to share with you the meat of today's presentation. So here I've drawn a circle. So I want you to envision a balloon, okay? So this circle represents a balloon, a 3D spherical balloon. and I have filled it with different types of gases. All right. Now let me go ahead and jump into drawing here. What happens is, let's say I fill it with oxygen, nitrogen, helium, and hydrogen, right? The helium and the hydrogen are the lightest of these gases, so they will rise. Now, this is the surface all the way around. No matter where you are inside of this balloon or this closed system, this is the surface from the top to the bottom. Okay, so the helium and the hydrogen, if they're released from this surface area, they will rise and they will keep on going upwards, right? If they're released from this side over here, the helium and the hydrogen will rise and they'll keep on going. Likewise, if they're released from here, they will rise, they will keep on going. If they're released from the quote-unquote bottom, they will rise and they will keep on going. Now, the highest they can go from the perspective of the quote-unquote surface all the way around is the exact center. That is the highest that they can go, because then once they can't transgress that, because then they'll be going downwards, right? Makes logical sense to me. So they will layer themselves out. If you have a small balloon, you know, they might not layer themselves out within a small balloon, but imagine that our balloon is the size of Earth. Okay, that's appropriate. Now they will create layers. The gases themselves will start to layer out from the heaviest ones, or the most dense gases, staying down here towards the bottom. Okay, so we'll have a layer of gases down here. We'll have a layer of gases just above that. We'll have another layer of gases here. And then we'll have this area right here in the center. All right, because all of the gases are moving upwards and coalescing at the center, that means that the center of this balloon will have the highest pressure. Does that make sense? You're adding more gas to something and it creates more pressure right there in the middle. Hold on, I just want to say thank you. I just got another donation from Furious TV. I've been following this channel for good entertainment value for years, but it's getting weird. How many of these theories are getting a bit too real? I don't know, but thank you so much. I appreciate your support, Furious. All right, good to have you. All right, let's go back to Scoobit, our little drawing here. So these are gases. These circles are layers of gases, which is what happens here on Earth, okay? The only reason that we have what we call air down here on the surface is because we have wind, right? The winds mix. They blow around and they mix these lower layers of gases, mostly nitrogen and oxygen and stuff, and they mix them up. We call this homogeneous, which means a mixture, okay? That's down here where we live. But if we go higher up, beyond the jet stream, they start to layer themselves out, okay? Just like a cake. We've got gas layers. So think about this. If all of the pressure, or if the highest amount of pressure is in the center, right around here, right? That will be the highest amount of buoyancy. Because when you increase the pressure of gases or a fluid, then you put something into that fluid, like the atmosphere, then it will float more with more pressure. Or, I'm sorry, more pressure would be more dense as well. Right? So things will float right here in the middle. Now let's change our balloon. Okay? This time we will have a balloon that is shaped like this. Like a snow globe. Same exact concept. We've just changed the shape slightly, right? This is closer to my cosmological view. This is a simple view. This is by no means in-depth or anything, or drawn to scale. So imagine this is three-dimensional as a dome. Okay, so let's just call this the ground down here. I'll use a different color for that. And we'll call the rest of it the dome. All right, simply put. One sec. There it is. All right, cool. So same exact concept. We have gases within our closed system of Earth, of this world, okay? This is the dome itself, made of ice, holding in those gases and creating a closed system. It closes us off from the rest of the fractal verse beyond and below. All right. Now, keep in mind, this is just a simple drawing. I actually think that the Earth continues on and goes downward on both sides, and that it's probably more of like a crater dipping down in the middle with mountains and stuff like that. Okay, so it's very in-depth. But let's talk about the gases. Let's go back to the gases. Now, the Earth releases gases. So all of this red portion right here, all this Earth, the hollow Earth, the inside of the Earth, it's creating gases right now as we speak from many different places. There's plant life, large, gigantic, titanic plant life that is growing right now inside of the hollow Earth, and it's releasing oxygen. Nitrogen is created from death and decay of organic objects and other things as well. The Earth is just bubbling up. So let's grab a different color here. I'll just use blue. So these are all little bubbles of gases that rise up from the Earth. And these gases will enter into our atmosphere. And there's different gases. Okay? Now, down here at the bottom, we have wind. So down here, these gases will all mix together, and that's what we call air that we breathe. However, when they rise up and they continue to rise up, they will start to layer themselves out. Remember, this is the surface, but this is also the surface. Keep that in mind, okay? The dome is also a surface, or an extension of our surface, all right? So these gases will rise up, and they will stay in the middle. This area right here in our sky, high up in our sky, okay? This is an area of high density gases, where the gases are meeting, specifically the lightest gases, which is helium and hydrogen, which is just happens to be what they say the sun is made out of, helium and hydrogen. So, hypothetically speaking, theoretically speaking, we would have an area high up in our sky in a sort of three-dimensional, spheroidal, elliptical, whatever, in the middle. This is space, okay? That's what I'm trying to say. This is the space that exists between the dome and the surface. That's space to me. Now, up here, because the pressure is so high and it's so dense, the gases are so dense, it changes the buoyancy, okay? Where things would before fall down when they're very dense, up here within this pocket of dense gases and pressure, things would float. So it's very similar to if you go out to a freshwater lake, right? If it's a freshwater lake, you're going to have to strive to stay afloat. You're going to have to swim and keep yourself buoyant and take big breaths of air. However, if you increase the density of the fluid, which is the lake, and you jump into the Dead Sea, which is full of particulates and salt and whatnot, then it becomes much more dense of a fluid, and people just float around in the Dead Sea, which is what they do. Tourists will go there and they'll be like, look at me, oh my God, I'm not drowning, I'm floating. This is why. This is the Dead Sea for all intents and purposes, okay? It's a Dead Sea of gases right up there in the middle of the sky. Now, what that also means, inversely, is that the area, let me get a different color here. This area along the edge of the dome, this area has less pressure, right? So if all of the pressure exists in the center, or quote-unquote space area of our sky, then the furthest away from that point would be the least amount of pressure, right? So you should experience and expect to find low pressure systems all the way around, and therefore cold, temperature-wise, right? This would be very warm right here in the middle. This would be very cold off to the sides over here. Now down here, this extends all the way down here to the edge too, right? So these areas of our world we would expect to be very cold. Now these gases get so cold that they skip a stage and they go from a gas directly to a solid after a certain distance away, with the pressure being low enough and the temperature being low enough, and these gases freeze into the firmament. They freeze into the dome. It's our very atmosphere freezing and creating a barrier in our world. Okay, sweet. Hold on. I think I just got a donation on PayPal from Francis, $25, and says, I love you, or I love you. Thank you. Hey, thanks, Francis. That was cool. High five for donating through PayPal. All right, cool. Let's continue on. So let's recap. This is the Earth down below. These blue bubbles are gases that the Earth is releasing. This also happens within a neuron. This is exactly what a neuron does, just so you know. Okay, gases are released from the neuron, from inside of the neuron. They go all the way up, and then they bubble up until there's this big event that releases the gases and the electrical signals and stuff. And then they transfer from one neuron to another neuron. This is basically the apocalypse, from my point of view, right? It's depressurization. It's a depressurization of this little local world where all the little Whos live in Whoville, which is us, okay? So keep this in mind. Keep this in mind that as the gases are being released from deep within the Earth, right, and they begin to fill up, this adds to the pressure of this world. As the pressure increases in this world, our pressure systems, known as weather, will become more and more chaotic and more turbulent and destructive, all the way up until Mother Nature helps us out by releasing that pressure. And that's whenever this dome up here cracks open, as I talked about before, the apex of this dome. All of these gases will rush up, especially all this pressure right here in the middle, okay? That's all going to go just like this. Whenever this pressure, when the dome cracks open, which it will, all this pressure is going to go squibbit all the way up to the apex of the dome, and it will burst out of the dome and leave this world. Now, because our atmosphere is fluid, and there is an escape of fluid from this closed system, which is now suddenly open temporarily, right? Whatever amount of gas escapes, whatever quantity of gas escapes from our atmosphere and leaves this world will be directly proportional to an increase in buoyancy within our atmosphere. What does that mean? Simply put, objects now will start to float up into the sky. All right, we'll have zero gravity. For those of you who believe in gravity, the apocalypse will bring about zero gravity. The Earth will lose its perceived gravitational force. Phil, I just got a donation from Phil. Says, what do you think of SpaceX rockets leaking gas in space? Is it deliberate? Are they that inept, or are these leaks and explosions by design to perhaps damage the firmament? Good question. As I've mentioned before, I've never seen them leaking gas back in the 80s and 90s or even the early 2000s. That's a new thing for me. I don't believe their story. I believe there's some grains of truth to what they're up to and what they're doing, as I said before, but I don't believe they're official stories. And then, so let me cut right to the chase. I believe that the space agencies are ran by an elite level of very few people at the very top who know exactly what I'm teaching you right now about the world that we live in. And they know about the apocalypse. And they want to trigger the apocalypse, which means they want to blow holes in the dome if they can. Or they want to disrupt the Earth's magnetic field so that they trigger it to flip if they can, right? If they can get the Earth's magnetic field to flip, then the magnetism, which is keeping all of these diamagnetic gases inward, that magnetic barrier right? Forget about the physical barrier of the ice, okay? That's secondary. The real protective measure around our world is the magnetic barrier, which is also the exact same shape as this ice dome, okay? So there's an invisible barrier or shield around our world in the form of magnetism. That magnetism is strong enough to hold in all of the gases. So academics would say it's gravity pulling them. I would say it's magnetism pushing diamagnetic gases away and keeping them in and pressurizing our world. The physical barrier is secondary, and it is a result of those gases freezing into the shape of the magnetic barrier, which is that exact same shape. Anyways, I believe that the space agencies and all the elite of the world, like, they're trying to get out. All right, they're trying to trigger the apocalypse because it's been a very long time since we've had one, since the deluge, basically, like a large-scale apocalyptic event. I'm sure there are little fluctuations, which I call cataclysms, in between apocalyptic events, but they're trying to trigger it for a couple different reasons, probably multiple. One of those reasons is they want to get out of Earth. They want to leave this world so they can go to other worlds and be gods or whatever on other worlds. Anyways, that's my theory. Thank you so much for your support. I appreciate you. Where was I? I forgot. Let's see. So here we got this. So this is our world. This is the surface down here. These dots are gases being released from the Earth. They're being contained by the magnetic field that is around our sky and our Earth. This magnetic field goes through the Earth as well, okay? And then we have the actual physical ice barrier, the ice dome of the firmament, which helps to also keep things pressurized. The most pressure and the highest density or concentration of gases is right here in the middle, likely comprised of hydrogen and helium, right? And they will go all the way as high as they can go from each surface side, and they will stop right here in the middle. That's as high as they can go. This is the apex of the sky, you could say, before you start going downwards again, because up here, that's a surface. So once you get past the middle here, you're going to drop and you're going to go down. Now, I can add to this as well. There's so much that this helps to explain. When you include the firmament and you understand optics and how the light is passing through the firmament, okay? And pressure and density and all of these things, they really help they help me to understand how these things work in our world. So, for example, you could have, whenever the atmosphere depressurizes, as I said, according to Archimedes' principle, you'll have an equally buoyant force suddenly lifting up heavy objects down here on the surface, which means things will start to float up into the sky. Some things will escape and leave into space. Some things will remain inside. They'll just land, or some things will get trapped in the jet stream up here, and they'll just float around, right? Rocks, debris, whatever it may be, will be stuck up there in the sky, floating around until the next depressurization event, when they can leave the Earth. Now, what are those rocks that are floating around up in our heavens? They are akin to, I'll share with you now, the picture that I first showed you. This debris field that allegedly exists between, what is it, Mars and Jupiter, right? What do they call that? What's the academic name of the debris field of rocks? Somebody remind me in the chat. I've got a lot on my mind right now. Asteroid belt, is that what it's called? And then the Kuiper belt up here, right? Okay, yes. So this theory that I'm presenting to you helps to understand and reconcile the academic theory of the asteroid belt and the Kuiper belt as well. Let me get these pulled back up here. Boom. Okay, cool. So we can have an asteroid belt, bam, of asteroids that float around or whatever. And that can now be a possibility. Hold on, I just got a donation. I want to say thank you again. Furious TV, again, thank you, says, if during that event people get sucked past the firmament's barrier through the hole in the firmament, I guess there would be very limited time to come back. I agree with you. There will be very limited time to come back. But that's also the point. Once the depressurization is finished, there will be a transitional period or a neutral point where other beings from other Earths out there that have sufficient technology, or just liminal beings that live between worlds, aka space monsters, space animals, creatures, whatever, they can drop down into this world. If they have the technology or the ability to live out there, they can now come into our world, and they will come into our world. They will drop down from the sky. They won't fall. You know, people talk about the Nephilim and the fallen ones and stuff, and they're falling down to the earth. They're floating down to the earth, right? As that pressure release reaches an equilibrium, as that increased buoyant force starts to settle down and reach an equilibrium, those things will at first float upwards, but then it'll reach an equilibrium, and you know, things will just sort of be stagnant, but then things will start to float back down. So the fallen ones, or any beings that come down from the sky during this particular event, they won't just reach terminal velocity and slam into the earth and become a pancake and die. They just simply float back down to the earth. Now, boulders and rocks and debris and sand and all kinds of other things will also float back down to the earth and land in large piles, giving you great sand dunes and random strange boulders in places where they shouldn't be. You know what I mean? Those boulders are created in the sky. Okay, it's an accumulation of mud and debris. There's going to be a lot of water that gets sucked up. There's going to be a lot of sand, and there's going to be a lot of mud, and a lot of stuff from the surface will start mixing together up there in the sky. When you run a strong electrical charge from the plasma filament dragons that come into this world, they will pass through that, and they will solidify many of these globs of mud and muck and stuff, and they will create boulders. Right? Instantly, basically. So many of those boulders will just be scattered back down to the earth or thrown back down. And if you read and use comparative mythology to see the similarities within ancient myths and legends and oral traditions, you'll see this time and time again. That the sky god starts throwing down boulders and rocks, or the titans or whatever, and they, you know, there's a raining down of boulders during this particular time. Anyway, thank you so much again for your support. I appreciate you guys. All right, cool. What was I kind of discussing here? So we talked about the surface world down here, right? The light passes through the dome, you know, from different directions, from the plasma filaments or vortex that's above our world. It creates a focal point, which is the sun, which redistributes its light downward, creating daylight, and it moves around, giving us daytime. Did my mouse just freeze? My mouse froze. What the heck? Hold on. I hope my batteries aren't dying. So when I get replaced with AI, you'll know it, because I will stop having technical difficulties. Hold on. Let me see if I can fix this. I hope this works. Oh, I fixed it. Yay. Okay, cool. When in doubt, turn it off and turn it back on. All right, cool. So here's the firmament. Bam, that blue line. Here in the middle, this red glob, this is space. This is traditional space where people can float, objects can float, because it's an area of high density and high pressure gases that all move upwards directionally from the surface, which goes all the way around. And this exists right there in the middle. Now, the sun, like I said, happens to, let me get a sun color. Let's use the 80s sun color, shall we? I'm going to go with an 80s yellow sun instead of the 2025 whitish blue sun that we have now. So let's say we've got the sun. The sun stays around the edge of this, right? And that'll be my sun. Okay. I feel like Doc Brown. It's not to scale. You'll have to forgive me. So the sun, it'll move around this path, right around the edge right here. Okay. It'll move all the way around. Now, because it's moving all the way around, these gases in the middle, remember, these gases will float all the way up here. Then this is a focal point, and it redistributes its light down onto the earth, giving us daytime. Okay, that's daytime. But let's focus on this. This is a focal point of extremely hot gases, ionized gases, plasma. Okay, it's the same thing when you use a magnifying glass and you create a little focal point and you can burn a leaf, or if you're mean, you could burn ants and stuff like that. Now, all of these things are just dominoes, and they tip over the next domino, which is the implication. If we have a focal point, if this area is high density gases and it's mostly hydrogen and helium, and we have this focal point of burning hydrogen and helium right around the outside of it, making a circle or a circuit that goes around our world, giving us daytime, shining around the world just like that. What are the implications there? It's heating up the atmosphere wherever it goes, right? When it heats up the atmosphere, hold on, let me read something to you. I want to read something to you, a discussion I had with ChatGPT. Shall I? This is relevant. So, keep that model in mind. I know this is the boring part because I'm putting words on the screen, but try to bear with me, okay? 1 second. Oh, what did I just do? One moment. There we go. All right, cool. Now, I pose a hypothetical to ChatGPT. I know AI isn't perfect, okay? But follow me. I say, let's suppose that I blow up a balloon and I tie it into a knot so that it stays inflated. Inside of the balloon, there would be air pressure. And I'm wondering if the air pressure would be consistent throughout the inside of the balloon. Would it be homogeneous? Would it just be the same pressure all the way throughout the inside of the balloon? Or if the air pressure would be greater towards the inner walls of the balloon. Because this was my first thought. I thought that all the pressure would be on the outside, but that's not it. There is a force from the expansion of the balloon itself, and I was confusing that with pressure. ChatGPT says the air pressure inside of the balloon would be nearly uniform throughout. But it says gases tend to distribute pressure evenly in a closed container, so there wouldn't be a significant difference between the center and the inner walls, because now I'm using a small balloon, so it says there would not be a significant difference. So then I realized if I increase the size of this balloon to a planet, there will be a significant difference, right? So this is what I say. Well, significance aside, you said nearly. So I don't want to speak in generalities. I want to speak specifically. Let's say that my balloon was the size of a planet. Then would there be any kind of pressure differential between the exact center of the balloon and the area closer to the inside of the walls of the balloon, the surface versus space? It says if the balloon were the size of a planet, if it were, then yes, there would be a pressure differential. The pressure would be slightly higher near the center due to the weight of the air above it, compressing the gas inward, just as I just showed you in the diagram. This difference would depend on the density and amount of gas, but even in a large balloon, the pressure would not be uniform throughout. What that means is it would layer out. We would have atmospheric, stratospheric layers or whatever. So I respond and say, so hypothetically, if I had a large balloon the size of the sun, then at the exact center of the balloon, would the pressure be higher or lower than towards the outer walls of the balloon, aka the surface world? It says in that hypothetical scenario, the pressure at the exact center would be higher than near the walls, the surface. This is because the gas at the center would be compressed by the weight of all the gas of the layers above it. So the balloon that large, you definitely see a significant pressure gradient from the center outwards. Let's go back to this. This is a diagram of what I just read to you, okay? So we've got most of the pressure and density, atmospheric density, right here in the middle. And the sun, the focal point, goes around it, right? There's less pressure towards the outside, and therefore the temperature drops, the gases freeze, we get the creation of the firmament, the dome. The pressure is constantly increasing until the pressure release, which is the plasma apocalypse, right? Very good. Now, I ask it, when airplanes increase in altitude, when they go up, does the air pressure outside of the airplane go up or down? It says when they increase in altitude, the air pressure outside the plane goes down. This is because the higher you go, the thinner the atmosphere becomes, resulting in lower pressure. So I say, can wind exist in a closed system? Where does wind come from? If it's a closed system, there shouldn't be any wind. It says, yes, wind can exist in a closed system. Wind is essentially the movement of air from areas of higher pressure to areas of lower pressure. Keep that in mind. I'm going to show you this on the diagram. So wind moves from high pressure to low pressure. Keep that in mind. In a closed system, if there's a pressure difference due to heating, cooling, and other factors, air will move, creating wind within that system. I respond and say, so heating and cooling affects pressure within a closed system, and therefore wind is created, right? It says, yes, exactly. Heating a part of the closed system increases the air temperature and can create higher pressure in that region, while cooling another part lowers the temperature and the pressure. The resulting pressure difference causes air to move from the high pressure area to the low pressure area, generating wind. This is where the jet stream is created. Furious, oh, thank you so much. Furious TV just donated through the super chat and says, I've seen videos of rabbis talking about heat from the sun that will melt people's skin. I agree with that. That is going to happen. Even if it's through their religious prism, they do know a lot of things that they aren't disclosing from the Alexandria Library. Thank you again, Furious TV, and you make a really good point. And I just talked about on my prior live stream about the sun heating up and stuff. Now, let's get back to this, because I'm going to make a correlation here to the diagram that I keep showing you guys. I ask ChatGPT, does the Earth's jet stream move in the same direction as the apparent movement of the sun and the moon? Or does it move in the opposite direction? Because now I'm starting to think. I'm starting to put this together, right? ChatGPT says the Earth's jet stream generally moves from west to east, which is the same direction as the apparent movement of the sun and the moon across the sky due to the Earth's rotation. I ask it, are you retarded? You know what I mean? I have to correct ChatGPT. It's not, the end-all be-all of intelligence. Why? Because it says it moves from west to east, which is the same direction as the movement of the sun. Obviously, the sun apparently moves from east to west, right? So I'm like, are you retarded? And it says, I'm here to help and provide information. Let me know if there's something, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay. Oh, then I start arguing. Sorry. I forgot I was arguing with ChatGPT. I'm like, yeah, specifically, I want to know if you're retarded. I'm here to assist you, blah, 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 blah. Hey, who just gave out some JayDreamerZ memberships? Sassafras Griffin sent out 20. Damn, that's amazing. That's great. Well, let's do this. Let's take a quick break, shall we? All right, because this is going to blow up with all the memberships. I'm going to run a quick ad for my book and use the bathroom real quick. We'll come back, and then I'll tie in the jet stream to the movement of the focal point and the sun, and this will hopefully start to make some sense for you. All right, and until then, enjoy this advertisement for my books, okay? And thank you so much for all of the support in the chat. High fives to everybody. We'll be right back.
In a time when an ancient cataclysm is about to return, one book holds the key to unlocking the biggest secret in all of history. JayDreamerZ presents Ancient Oblivion, the Plasma Apocalypse. Study it, and you'll discover the very real details behind the reoccurring event that resets civilizations and reshapes the entire world. Bridging the gap between fiction and fact, this book is a must-have for all truth seekers. Then in his second book, you'll learn about the one place of refuge from this world storm. You'll explore the ends of the earth, find the fountain of youth, and envision yourself enveloped in the vapor canopy. In Ancient Oblivion, Return to Hyperborea. Available now. Order direct from JayDreamerZ and receive your very own autographed copy. Go to JayDreamerZ.com for more information on our ancient Oblivion and the Plasma Apocalypse, and sign up for a free 24-hour cram session with a complimentary day pass. The end is near, so order now before it's too late.
Here, shorter commercial than I thought it would be. I thought I had more time. Sorry about that. All right, cool. I'm back. Hopefully you guys weren't waiting too long. All right, so let's recap, okay? There might be people who are new and just joining us. So what you're seeing right now is my little local, simple diagram of my cosmological view of the world that we live in. This is the surface right here. This is the dome made out of ice. This is an area, the red area right here is an area of high pressure of gases that are built up. A dense area of gas. Because it's so dense, objects can float up high in the sky. This right here would be the Kármán line, right? So you just go up 60 miles, bam, that's where you can float around. Once you pass this area, you'll be falling. You will fall up towards the dome, okay? This is the sun. This is the focal point. It is created by the light that passes through the dome from plasma filaments that are spiraling above our world and around our world, okay? That light passes through the crystal clear ice, lots of it, passes through, reaches a focal point, redistributes it into daylight, okay? Now, keep this in mind. This is going to be heating up the atmosphere. Everything in here is atmosphere, all right? This is going to be heating up the local region or atmosphere around it as it moves in a circle. Now, we were reading, when we left off, about the jet stream and how it's created. So, I'm trying to get ChatGPT to answer my question. Let's see. Apparently ChatGPT does not like to be called retarded. And then I make the point it's personally offended and that it's a robot, so it shouldn't be personally offended. Let's skip all this. I went off into a diatribe of trying to argue with ChatGPT. All right, hold on. Let me skip all this. Okay, man, that went on for a while. I say I'm asking if you're retarded because you just told me the apparent motion of the sun is from west to east. Do you recall that? I misspoke earlier. The apparent motion of the sun is from east to west. Thank you for pointing that out. All right, when do I get back to the topic here? I'm like, it's becoming more and more difficult to trust you when you can't answer the simplest of questions. So look it up, okay, buddy? The apparent direction of the sun's travel in the sky is from east to west. Yay, good job, ChatGPT. That's correct. All right. So I say, very good, robot. I'm so proud of you. Now look up what is the direction of travel of the jet stream, right? So I tell it to look it up. I start telling it to reference the internet instead of just giving me answers. The jet stream typically moves from west to east in the opposite direction as the apparent movement of the sun across the sky. They're in opposition to each other. Why would that be? So I say, now hypothetically, let's say that we added a very hot source of heat, the sun, to the exact center of our balloon world. How would that change the pressure differential between the center and the inside walls? Also, how would the wind that would be created by that affect the pressure? How would all of these things affect the density of the air inside of that closed system? So now I'm introducing a sun into my balloon world that I've created for ChatGPT. Right? It says, If a very hot heat source were added at the exact center, it would increase the temperature and the pressure at the center. This would create a stronger pressure gradient between the center and the inner walls, causing more intense wind as the air moves outward. So that's just if the sun were at the exact middle, right? So if this red area was the sun, that's how ChatGPT is seeing what I'm putting out there. I haven't created a sun that's moving yet. Okay, I have to go in small increments when I discuss these things with ChatGPT because they go against academia. Causing more intense wind as the air moves outward from the center. The wind would help redistribute the heat and the pressure throughout the system. As the hot air rises and moves outward, it would cool and lose pressure as it approaches the walls or the surface, creating a continuous circular pattern. Overall, the density of the air would decrease near the center due to the heat, while the density near the inner walls, blah, 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 blah. So I say air pressure in Antarctica is lower compared to air pressure at the equator. Is that correct? It says, yes, that is correct. Air pressure at the surface is generally lower in Antarctica compared to the equator due to colder temperatures and lower humidity. So I ask it, does air pressure have any bearing on the weight of an object, right? So if we live on the surface in an area where there is more air pressure, right, then it would change the weight of the person living there compared to the weight of the same person who would live in Antarctica where there's a different amount of air pressure. So it says, yes, air pressure does have a bearing on the weight of an object. Higher air pressure exerts more force on an object, slightly increasing its effective weight. However, this effect is minimal. I don't like it when it says that. For most objects, and is usually negligible in everyday conditions. However, we're not talking about everyday conditions. We're talking about the entire Earth. So I start arguing with it. You always tell me things are negligible. I don't ask you about that crap. So stop telling me it's negligible. I'll determine if it's negligible or not. So it says, understood. Air pressure does affect the measured weight of an object because higher pressure increases the buoyant force that's acting on it. Let me repeat that. Higher pressure increases the buoyant force acting on it, making it effectively lighter. Just like we talked about in the diagram. Higher pressure, making it lighter or able to float if it's light enough. Lower pressure decreases this buoyant force, making the object effectively heavier. So what does that mean? Right? What's the practical application of that in our world? Our actual experience living on the surface. I say, so hypothetically, and also in real life, let's say that you have a human being that weighs 200 pounds at the equator. They would actually weigh slightly more in Antarctica because the pressure is less. Is that correct? Less pressure, right? Objects become heavier, essentially, because there's less buoyancy. So it says, yes, that is correct. A person would weigh slightly more in Antarctica due to the lower air pressure, which results in less buoyant force acting on them. Additionally, the stronger gravitational pull at the poles compared to the equator also contributes to increase in weight, blah, 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 blah. So I said, you said there's stronger gravitational pull at the poles. It says, yes, gravitational pull is slightly stronger at the poles than at the equator. This is due to the Earth's shape, blah, 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 blah. I said, in a closed system, when air is displaced by wind, does pressure drop in that area or does the pressure increase in that area? Right? So within our closed system, right, when air is displaced by wind, when you have a lot of wind in a particular area, does the pressure go down, which makes objects heavier, or does the pressure go up, which makes objects lighter? It says, when air is displaced by wind in a closed system, the pressure in that area that it leaves drops, while the pressure in the area it moves to rises. The difference in pressure drives the continued movement of air until equilibrium is reached. So I ask, how many miles up does a person need to travel to go beyond the jet stream? And so it says about 9 miles. To go beyond the jet stream, a person would need to travel above this altitude, typically around 10 miles, okay? Which atmospheric layer is the jet stream found in? The jet stream is found in the troposphere, near the upper boundary within the stratosphere, in a region that is often referred to as the tropopause. What's the temperature difference in general between the upper troposphere and the lower stratosphere? Let me skip a little bit of this, okay? Because I'm asking about temperature, and I know this part's getting a little boring for some people. I say, hey, buddy, I'm in America. We use Fahrenheit. Don't give me that Celsius garbage. All right. So let's see. I started talking about the different temperatures of the different layers because here's my point that I'm trying to make with ChatGPT. As you increase pressure, when you get closer and closer to this middle buoyant area that people call space, right? It should get hotter. If the pressure is increasing, it should get warmer, or it should get warmer and warmer. But in academics, we're taught the opposite. It gets colder and colder. Is that true though? So I'm trying to discuss it with ChatGPT. Let's see. I said the reason I want you to understand, I want you to understand the reason I'm performing this thought experiment. It's to think outside of the box and come up with an alternative cosmology, one that is a closed system and closer to the ancient cosmologies of the world. I want you to forget about gravity and the concept of gravity completely. We're going to deal with density and buoyancy. And we're going to compare this hypothetical world of the balloon-shaped closed system the size of the sun to our actual world to see what similarities we can find in this thought experiment. Do you understand the purpose? So it says, yes, I understand you're exploring a hypothetical cosmology based on density and buoyancy within a closed system, using a balloon analogy and comparing it to our world, our actual world, to find similarities without considering gravity. So I say, very good. So we have imagined that we have placed an artificial sun, a very hot point of focus, in the center of our closed system. Now, let's go ahead and give that sun a circular motion around the center of this closed system. It doesn't go all the way to the edges, so it has its own tropics, basically, similar to our sun within this balloon world. Do you understand? So now what I've told it to do, instead of imagining this is the sun, I've told it to imagine that there is a point of focus that is in a circuit around this area. And it says, yes, I understand. You've placed an artificial sun at the center of the closed system, giving it a circular motion around the center, creating its own tropics within the balloon world, similar to how the sun behaves in our world. I said, yes, and by circular motion, I mean a circuit that it follows, not that it's spinning or anything like that. It says, okay, I understand. I say, yes, very good. Now, as this artificial sun follows this circuit, as it's moving about on its daily path, then it would naturally heat up the surrounding air around the areas where it is. And that heating of the air would create wind that emanates from this artificial sun, which would move in the opposite direction, from hot to cold, creating a type of jet stream within this artificial closed system of the balloon world. Is that correct? So the heat, the point of focus, right, moves from east to west. I mean, from east to west in this direction, we'll say, right? Now, as it does this, since it's moving in this direction over here, the wind, let me get a different color here. The wind that's created will actually move in the opposite direction, this way. Okay, so this is the jet stream that is created by the very sun itself. The sun is creating winds high up there in the atmosphere, and it's creating the jet stream in this hypothetical scenario. It says, yes, that is correct. The artificial sun heats up the surrounding air along its circuit. It would create regions of rising warm air. This movement would generate wind flowing from the heated areas towards the cooler areas, which is outwards, effectively creating a jet stream-like pattern within the closed system, moving from hot to cold regions. Now I say, very good. let's imagine that we put tiny little people on the base of this balloon, where the ground level is. At the base of this balloon world, they develop rocketry, and they blast their rocket upwards, aiming towards that center point, around which the artificial sun moves in its circuit. Do you understand that concept? So, I tell it to imagine that you've got people down here. Hold on, let me switch the color up. So I tell it to imagine you got little people down here on the base, on the surface world. They develop rocketry. They shoot up towards this red area right here. And I'm asking it to follow along. It says, yes, I understand. The tiny inhabitants of the balloon world launch a rocket from the ground level, aiming towards the center of the system where the artificial sun follows its circuit. I say now, on their journey towards the center of this system, they would have to go through this jet stream that's been created, which is a displacement of the air, which would cause the lower air pressure, the air moving about causes lower air pressure, the higher in altitude that they go. Is that correct? It says yes. As they travel upward through the jet stream and beyond, they would encounter progressively lower air pressure as the density of the air decreases with altitude. Then I say, however, once they went beyond the jet stream, which is where the air is displaced by the circuit of the artificial sun, the pressure would naturally increase because the sun is making a circuit. It doesn't exist at the center. So now the pressure starts to increase once more. What I'm trying to have ChatGPT understand is why there is temperature differentials in these different layers of atmosphere, and how the sun, within its own layer of the atmosphere, affects the temperature of the layers around it, and how the jet stream affects the temperatures of the layers around it. One moment. Beyond the jet stream, where the influence of the artificial sun's heating and displacement diminishes, the air pressure would stabilize and potentially increase again, which means it would get hotter again. This would be akin to the thermosphere. Since the center is not heated directly and the air would not be displaced in the same way. Anything else? Or did I move on to something else here? Let's see. Yeah, I think I started asking about the pillars of heaven and some other stuff I was studying at the time. So that might be it. Oh. No, yeah, that's about it. All right, cool. So anyways, let's jump back to my picture because I like pictures better than words. So this is the sun. This is the focal point. It moves from east to west, right? It heats up the atmosphere around it. That heat moves. It transfers from areas that are hot, where it is, to areas that are cold, where it is not. And therefore, the jet stream moves in the opposite direction. Make sense? That's important to know. Why is that important to know? Because if you know which direction the winds will be moving in during the apocalypse, you can better prepare. Right? So if the winds will be moving from west to east, right, then you might want to be on the other side of a large mountain that will block those winds. Right? So you don't get sucked up and blown away by these hurricane force winds that will be coming. So if you live right here, this is you, the winds are going to go up over this mountain and pass you by, which is why many of the ancient people knew this or just happened to live in the right spot and they would survive. They wouldn't get sucked up into the atmosphere during the depressurization event. All right, sweet. Damn. All right, space. Space may be the final frontier, but it's made in a Hollywood basement. All right. I feel that's pretty good. Let me jump in the chat. I'd like to take questions. Okay. I've gone over a lot of material here. There's a lot of quote unquote science behind what I'm trying to explain. I feel that there is. And I like to balance cosmological views, my own, with other things that I've learned in my walk and on my path. So if you'd like to ask a question, I'm going to get the chat pulled up. Type in @JayDreamerZ, spell it correctly, and it will highlight on my side. I'm going to go ahead and get that pulled up right now. If I can remember how to do it. Oh yeah, that's right. Where is the chat? There we go. I need to pop out the chat. Who's the #1 fans in the chat? Let me see. Is there still the game? Oh, we got Phil, who's #2. Let me click on top fan, see what that does. Oh, sweet. Tiger Hardy is #1. Phil's 1476 is #2. Johnny, is that Johnny Lookout? I forgot what your full name there is. Johnny Look is #3, followed by Stray Angle, Kimberly Frederick, Keith, Sarah Smith, Joey Crystal, Vanessa 718, Jason Leisure, and that's the top 10. All right, sweet. That's awesome. I love that they have that in there. All right, let me pop out the chat and I will take questions if you have any questions, specifically about what we're discussing, please. All right, cool. So I've got that popped out. Give me 1 second. Go ahead and think of some questions for me. I'm actually scooch that back how I had it. And I'll put your comments on the screen live. Now, let me test it out, see if this works. I'm going to look for the first person that types in @JayDreamerZ. You could type in J if I happen to see it. I'll read it. I think somebody did type in Dito. Dito typed in J. Hold on, let me see if this works. Oh, snap. I'm hiding it. Hold on 1 sec. Where's my chat? There we go. All right, so Dito types in J. So the wind will blow in reverse. Yes, I believe so. At least during this next cycle. I think it flips every other cycle. So let me answer your question here, Dito. So right now the sun moves from east to west, but during the next cycle, I believe that the electromagnetic flow will flip, and therefore the direction of the plasma that creates the direction of the sun, moon, and stars will change direction. The sun will actually rise in the west and set in the east, which means that the jet stream will move in the opposite direction. So when people look up, 1 second. When people look up into the heavens during this next age, and they see the plasma leaking out of the apex dome, let me show you what they'll see. This might be of interest to you. I'll just use yellow. It doesn't really matter what color it is. Let's say that this is the apex dome, the hole in the sky, right? Plasma will leak out of that. So let's say that the plasma comes out this way, and then it's hit by the winds. So it will start to move in the direction of the jet stream. Plasma will come out this way. It'll move in the direction of the winds. Damn, my mouse died again. I need to get some batteries for this mouse. 1 sec. Boom. All right, so, oh shoot, it's really dying. Jace! Come here. I need a helper. I need my helper. Thank you. Will you grab me a don't get on camera if you don't have your shirt on, buddy. You need to put a shirt on. Grab me a AA. Yeah, jump on. No, yeah, okay, fine. Jump over my bed. Is this a AA? Oh yeah, it is. Yeah, AA, please. All right, 1 second. I'm having a dad moment. Oh, thank you. No problem. Very nice. All right, cool. This should do the trick. Hopefully. Hold on. I might need you. I'm good. Thank you. Appreciate you. All right. Obviously, the plasma comes out. It follows the jet stream. Plasma comes out. It follows the jet stream, right? So this is just an idea of something that people will see up in the heavens, up in the sky when they look up, okay? Obviously, this symbol is known by many different things. However, this symbol will change every other cycle because the jet stream will switch directions. So, during the next cycle afterwards, the plasma will come out and it'll go this way. Now, one of these represents a time of evil, depending on your perspective. One of these represents a time of good, a golden age, depending upon your perspective. So this exact same symbol, when it's flipped one way, can indicate something good based on your perspective, which time you resonate with, right? The time we're in now, or the magical time to come. And people will see it as an omen of good or evil. All right, sweet. That was a good one, a good question that led to a nice little teaching moment there in the chat. Bam. All right, cool. Let me jump back into the chat and see if anybody else has any questions. Yeah, actually a lot of people have questions. All right, sweet, good. First one I see that says @JayDreamerZ is Dabbin' Good. Dabbin' Good says, JayDreamerZ, have you ever thought of another dome outside of this dome, like a 3-ring circus, Mount Meru, Inner Ring, Atlantis, when all the rings are under one dome, one kingdom? I like how you're thinking. So we'd have to navigate that mentally and perform a thought experiment, right? What creates the dome? If we're saying that the gases are what freeze and create the dome, then in order for there to be another layer or another dome beyond that, then the gases would have to unfreeze. There would have to be heat introduced beyond the first dome, right? And then that would beg into question how the plasma works and stuff. So I haven't really thought about that as being an option at the moment, but I do like your line of thinking. So it just requires a little bit extra thought. Angelina Positano says, JayDreamerZ, why does the sun appear to dip below the horizon? I think the simplest answer to that, Angela, is because the focal point is just moving far away. When things move far away, they get closer and closer to the horizon, and they get smaller and smaller until they disappear. So it looks like it's dipping below the horizon. It is, in essence. It's just moving so far away that you can't see it, and it's starting to curve away too, which is why it follows that path in the sky. Thank you, Kimberly, for posting all of my links into the chat for Instagram, Twitter. Some people may have found my Snapchat, I don't know, Facebook, my Patreon as well. So that's how you can support me if you guys actually want to. That's the way I would prefer, is by joining my Patreon or just direct donations to PayPal. That's why I left these 2 links up here. Those directly affect my life. You guys influence my path by donating or supporting me through PayPal or Patreon, like every month. You literally change what I do and the decisions I make based on how much money I have. So, you know, what I can do as a father and my experiences with my son and where I can go because of how much gas I have and stuff, you guys actually influence my path, and I'm thankful. Sharon Bostock says, JayDreamerZ, so what happens to the pressure when the Earth expands? Good question. So let us suppose that the Earth, this red section down here, grows, which I believe it does, all right? So when it grows, we have to think about a few different things. One, the firmament, if it is actually connected to the Earth, would crack open, right? It would have to. The firmament would have to get bigger. It would have to fix itself, and we'd have a larger firmament, right? That there's so many implications to that as well that I really like, but I don't want to confuse too many people. So the Earth grows. What happens to the pressure? So the pressure will be released, and it will take much longer for the pressure to develop and build up once more. Hypothetically, okay, unless you have just an abundance of more gases that are being released. It could be directly proportional, so maybe there would be no change. I don't know, but that's a good question. I like it. Let's see. Lucy Rose Up says, Joey and Crystal is tag JayDreamerZ, so he will see your question. Yes, Lucy Rose Up is correct. If you type in @JayDreamerZ, it will highlight on my side. Leo Persia typed in @JayDreamerZ and says, thank you for all the important work that you do. I fully appreciate it. You're very welcome. And I thank you for the kind words. Let's see. I'm catching up in the chat here. Online Bigot Radio says, JayDreamerZ, so with this event, is east side of Rockies a good place? Yes. That's where I live, actually. But yes, the closer to the mountains, the better. Okay. Or like if you live in a valley up there, in the mountains, that would be optimal. That'd be awesome. Like right at the base of the mountain itself. Right next to a huge cliff that's on bedrock would be the best place in my mind. Or inside of NORAD. I mean, that would probably be a really good place. Let's see. NORAD is a doomsday bunker, just so you know. It has nothing to do with what they tell you. It's like Space Force Base Camp or any crap like that, okay? It's a doomsday bunker. Watch any movie that features NORAD, they'll show you. What else? The Little Season Theory, I like that name, says, JayDreamerZ, give us your best estimate on how many miles away the sun is from us on the Earth. I will go with about 40,000 miles. That is something I have not calculated. So I don't want to give an estimate, honestly, because it would probably be wrong off the top of my head. Math is not my strong suit. I can figure that out, but I can't do it live on air right now. I'd have to like devote some time to figuring out the math on that. It's not at this point in my walk, I don't really care how far away it is. I just know it's under the dome. You know what I mean? However, I'm not saying it's unimportant. I'm just saying it gets into math, numbers. That's not really my deal. Let's see what else. Jason Kyle's in the chat, says, JayDreamerZ, does this process happen over a few days or is it more drawn out like months or years? That depends on what process you're referring to. We have talked about many different processes during the course of the presentation. If you're talking about the actual depressurization of the atmosphere, that process takes about a week, is my best guess, between 7 to 10 days. 7 to 12. I'd push it a maximum of 12, a minimum of 7. Those are the 7 days of creation. But the whole process is never ending. You know what I mean? This is all cyclical. It's all looping and stuff. This happens over and over and over. Hokmah and Binah. I like that name too. That's cool. JayDreamerZ, maybe I missed it, but did you explain how the sun is below the firmament and not a focal point directly at the dome? I don't understand your question, so let me reread it. Did I explain how the sun is below the firmament? Yes. So, let me take your comment down. So within this diagram right here, you have the firmament, which is this right here, and the sun is under it or below it, you could say, right? I mean, technically, the sun is above this portion of the firmament, aka Antarctica, that's lifting up from the edges here. But yeah, so the sun is under the firmament, more accurately, not really, you know, it's under it. So this is the sun, it's under the dome. Boom. Let me see what else you said here. Let's see. Below the firmament and not a focal point directly at the dome. I think what you're saying is that the focal point is down here and not like a part of the dome actually embedded in the dome. So that sounds like that's what you're saying. So that's not what I believe. I know some people believe that the stars and the moon and the sun are all actually in the dome itself, like in the structure of the dome. I do not. I believe that they are down below the dome and that they're created by craters and anomalies that exist on the dome itself. Very good. Let's jump to the next question. Julie Miller. What's up, Julie Miller? Says, JayDreamerZ, do you think our world here is changed or different after it changes back after the alternate apocalypse? I hope that makes sense. Let me try. Do you think our world here is changed or different after it changes back? I see what you're saying. So you're saying, will today's modern world, can we expect it to return? After this next cycle, when everything is going to change, we'll enter into the world of magic, mysticism, amplified electrical fields within the atmosphere, monsters, mutants, all that stuff. And then another apocalyptic cycle comes, and then we have this world once again, this timeline once again. Yes, I do believe that. I believe that this timeline that we're in now has happened before. That we've had the age of technology, the water world, the world that is missing energy and a hunger develops. I believe that this world, we've seen this world many times before, and it will come back one of these days. Let's see, what else? Anybody else in the chat have a question? Or a comment or whatever? We got Anthony Gallo, who says, JayDreamerZ, will the tempest which is the world storm, start when the sun begins its transgression beyond the northern tropics? No, it will not. That's a good question. However, the sun will heat up, and so the weather patterns and stuff, you'll have tempests, you'll have all kinds of like real strong, small omens of the great storm that's to come, but you won't have the great storm. Not yet. Or only after the apex dome blows open. You're correct. So the world tempest comes only after the apex dome blows open. So let me show you that in a diagram form here. Let's use purple. So when this dome blows open, hold on. One sec. Boom. So when this dome blows open, bam, and all the atmosphere is leaking out, right? What's going to happen is just like pulling the plug at the bottom of your sink or bathtub, all the fluid, which is the atmosphere, will all start to circle around the world across, okay? Now, you're gonna have some areas that are affected first and some areas that are affected last, okay? But that's the world storm, and it's created by the depressurization of the atmosphere, which escapes up through the hole in the firmament. That's the world storm. Now, when the sun itself gets hotter and hotter and hotter, the focal point, and starts moving towards Mount Meru, it will start, daylight will become like a beam, like a laser beam, and it will start burning everything in its path. Now, this will heat up everything as it moves across. So this is going to create really strong weather patterns in these areas, okay? So these will be omens of the great storm that will follow. All right, cool. Let's see if we have anybody else in the chat that would like to ask a question. I see Chris in the chat. Chris, hold on, let me get back to that. Chris says, JayDreamerZ, do you believe that there is also a subsequent worldwide flood after each plasma apocalypse that buries existing civilizations in a mud flood? Good question, Chris. I believe that there are large scales and small scales of everything, okay? The large scale apocalypse, hold on, let me take your question down real quick. All right, going back to my diagram. All right, now, hold on, let me work on this diagram for just a quick second here. I'm going to show you instead of describe it to you. One sec. All right, so first we need to think about the Great Flood, okay? So the Great Flood, I'm just going to erase all this stuff in the middle of the world, okay? Now, here's how the Great Flood is created. We have geoplasmas that erupt straight up into the air of nitrogen and oxygen, okay? Beams, pillars, columns of ionized gases, primarily oxygen and nitrogen, okay? Those will layer out over time. Then, the next time the sky blows open, this is the age of magic when you see all these pillars and beams and light poles and stuff that look like they're holding up the sky, okay? The next time, during their apocalyptic cycle, the same thing will happen. The firmament will crack open, and ionized hydrogen from above is going to come down and slam into all these layers of oxygen and nitrogen, creating an ocean and other byproducts, okay? Which will then rain down onto the earth and flood the earth. That is what I call the deluge. That is the Great Flood. There's also waters that come up, okay? Now, that is the Great Flood. Let me just double check your question. Do I believe there is a subsequent worldwide flood? So that is the worldwide flood that I just drew for you. That does not happen every apocalyptic cycle. I want to be clear on that. So within my view of the plasma apocalypse, the Great Flood comes every other cycle. A flooding comes, and then the oceans will be removed the very next cycle. And then the cycle after that, the oceans will return, okay? But you're correct in saying that there will be worldwide flooding, which is not as big and not as great as the Great Deluge. That's caused by liquefaction. And liquefaction causes the waters within the earth to so the earth will start shaking, okay, because of all the gases that are being released and stuff. When the earth starts to shake, all the inner earth waters start to rise up to the surface, and we'll have small flooding the world across. Okay, will not be a deluge. It will not introduce oceans or anything like that. But the waters from inside the earth will rise up, and they'll mix with all of the debris and all of the mud and muck and sand and soil and everything, which will cause things to sink down into it. So there's a danger of getting sucked up into the sky. There's also a danger of getting sucked down or sinking down into the earth. The world afterwards will experience mud floods. So there'll be flooding of muds, especially from high places to low places, as liquefaction causes everything to become basically liquid and mud-like. The mountains will melt or dissipate. What do they call that? They'll come apart, okay, which, you know, there'll be mudslides and everything, right? So yes, that will happen every time, but people aren't going to really notice mud floods and stuff during the deluge, because the deluge just covers up everything. You know what I mean? But yes, there will be mud floods to be experienced during this next time, and they will cause things to sink down into the world, into feet of mud, which will then dry and harden, especially as things become more dense over time. That mud turns into rock, etc. And then we have, you know, stuff just buried in the earth, literally covered up by the earth, physically covered up by the earth. All right, I like that question. That's a good one. Thanks, Chris. Let's see what else we got. We got K Daly 411 who says, JayDreamerZ, do you know what creates the focal points, the stars, specifically what makes it come through the dome and move? I do have a theory about that. So what creates, let's see, the stars. Okay, let's talk about the stars. Let me draw, I got to draw a new diagram real quick. Let's do this. One moment. So I'm going to draw my theory of how the stars are created for you. So let's start with black. Oh, that's purple. In the beginning, everything is black. So let's start with black. And then I'll just draw, don't worry about the colors, okay? But I'm just going to draw like an earth. Oh, it's black already. All right, I'm going to draw the earth, the surface right here, boom. And then the dome going around, and then the apex dome, which droops downwards. And then the dome continues on all the way to the other side over there, boom, just sort of like that, okay? So this is a more accurate representation of the surface down here and the dome itself, okay? This is also your heart, earth, and stuff like that. This is the apex dome. This is the portion of the firmament that droops downwards as the all-seeing eye and faces our world. Now, let me get out a different color for plasmas. On the other side of the dome are plasmas, ionized hydrogen, I believe. I'm just going to use red for those. All right, so there is a plasma that is coming down over our dome, energy that is covering our world. That plasma is spiraling. It is moving downwards according to the right-hand rule of thumb. It's actually going over the whole earth, okay? So pretend it's not going into the earth, but it's spiraling around this world, just like that. Okay, let me get rid of that. It's too messy. Anyways, plasmas are coming down over the dome, onto the dome. They can't go through the dome, but the light from those plasmas can pass through the dome, right? So what happens is, depending on where on the firmament the light hits, let's focus on this portion right here, which is the apex dome. Let me draw a new apex dome here real quick. I like drawing because I'm more of a visual person. So I'm going to draw for you how I believe the stars are created, basically. I think they're created by the apex dome and light passing through it. So I'm going to really zoom in and create a better apex dome here for you. So let's say that this is the portion of the dome that droops downward, the apex of the dome. Something along those lines right there. Now, you can find this in hundreds of medieval drawings all throughout antiquity. They will show you this in the sky in the drawings because they saw it back then. Now, let's keep in mind that the apex dome itself has weak spots, weak points on it, where smaller holes have been blown out like a cheese grater. Electrical lightning bolts of the gods probably zapped it and, you know, whatever it may be, but it's got weak points on it. Those weak points heal up and they seal themselves. I don't want to get too in depth, but basically on the dome, which is the actual moon, this is projected into our sky and we see the moon. On this dome, we have, hold on. I'm just going to erase this part. Okay. Just follow me. Bear with me here. Now, if we have a hole in the apex dome itself, and then it's going to change, how do I explain this? Once you run electricity back through this, or the magnetism returns after the neutral point, and magnetism disappears during the neutral point, okay? This will refreeze into a new shape, which means it will create a crater, okay? Depending on what side of it you're on. On this side, it's a dome. On this side, it's a crater, okay? The light will pass through that crater, that anomaly on the dome. So remember, this is all hollow up here. Okay, this is the firmament itself. This would be like the space beyond. Okay, so this up here is all hollow. Plasmas are coming through from the area beyond. They will hit this portion and they will create something else entirely. But when they hit these anomalies or these craters or domes on the moon, which is the actual physical moon, right? Hold on, let me do a better job of this. I like that we're getting more specific. So if it hits here, it will redirect its movement and it will move inward just like this. You see that? And when it hits here, it will do the same. It will redirect and it will create a point of focus where they cross. It's probably way further down than how I'm drawing it right now. Okay, but this is a star, simply put. All right, this area where the light rays intersect, this is a point of focus. This is a star. And there are about 10,000 of these craters on the apex dome, which is the moon, which is why there are about 10,000 stars visible with the human eye in the sky. Hopefully that made a little bit of sense. Sweet. All right, let me jump back into the chat. I don't even know if I answered that question. Oh yeah, I did. So it's the light from the plasma passing through the dome. What's up? Mere? Did you have a different name? I've seen that picture before. Did you change your name? Naamire. Joey and Crystal MacArthur are in the chat. What's up, Joey and Crystal? High five to you guys. JayDreamerZ, who breaks open the firmament? There is no who about it. It is nature. It is a natural happening, and the firmament breaks open. Simply put, there's pressure that builds up in our atmosphere. The gases pressure is held inward by the magnetic force of the earth itself, which is dome shaped. Okay. So all that magnetism is pushing inward and keeping away those gases, with the exception of oxygen. Oxygen is actually attracted to the dome. So there's a case to be made that the dome is oxygen ice. Okay. Keep that in mind. But all the other gases are diamagnetic and they're all kept in, so which creates pressure. Now, when that magnetism is released, all the gases inside of this closed system from everywhere will rush up to the center point, the apex. All those gases are going to go straight to the top, okay? And that ice will be blown out. It will burst, okay? It will explode. The firmament right around here will explode. Who breaks open the firmament? So yeah, it's not who, but it is what. And it is the gases within our very own atmosphere compiled at the apex of the firmament itself during the neutral point of a magnetic shift or polarity shift in our world, which takes down the magnetic barrier that is pushing inward all the gases, and they're all let go all at once. They rush to the top, they burst a hole in the firmament. Good question. All right, let me jump back in the chat. We'll take a couple more, and then I'm probably going to take off and go make dinner and be dad. The Little Season Theory says, JayDreamerZ, don't you think that if we're spinning so fast, the clouds or moon or stars would be visibly spinning also? Yeah, I don't believe we're spinning at all. I don't. People's minds are spinning, but I don't believe in the spinning Earth theory. It doesn't even come close to making sense, or am I tripping? No, you're not tripping. Let's see. Anybody else? Oh, I'm not left-handed. I'm ambidextrous. I'm predominantly right-handed because that's how I was raised and grew up, but I practice doing stuff with my left hand all the time. I try to be balanced. Kimberly F. likes Jell-O, for the record. What else we got? Okay, let's see. I got a couple more here. Alex McCulloch. Do you believe that Jesus is the actual Son of God? That's an in-depth conversation that's unrelated to all of this, Alex. Sorry. Because then I got to ask you specifics, you know? How do you define God? Who do you think Jesus is? We got to get on the same page as far as that goes. So I will not answer that question at this time because we're wrapping things up, and that requires a lot more time to be able to figure out the truest answer to that question. However, I feel like those who know understand where I'm coming from. KT says, JayDreamerZ, would that relate to places like New Zealand or Hawaii that appear to grow? I'm guessing that by that you mean the growing of the earth, and yes, I believe it would. You're super welcome. Good to see you guys. What else we got? Oh, Gaia, that's right. I now remember. That's right. How do you pronounce this new name? I recently completed my yoga training. Oh, Namer. Oh, Namer. Okay. Namer. Very good. You're welcome. Who else we got? K Daily 411 says, JayDreamerZ, yes, thank you. I was curious because they seem to be very important to those who do rituals, etc., build temples, or match certain constellations. What's up, Tasty Waffles? Good to see you. Let's see. Who else we got? Alex McCulloch says, JayDreamerZ, do you think that when John the Baptist was saying the kingdom of heaven is near, that he was actually talking about the close physical proximity of the center of the earth and Eden? Ooh, man, good question. Man, I'm trying to transition because I'm more in like the discussion of the whole cosmology deal. The kingdom of heaven is near. He's talking about the close physical proximity of the center of the earth and Eden. Yeah, it could be. I could definitely see a case being made for that. I could also see a case being made for the kingdom of heaven being the cosmos that exist within our very own minds. So there's probably different levels to the whole John the Baptist thing. You guys know, remind me one of these days and I'll share my rap I made about John the Baptist. It's an Eminem parody, but it's all about John the Baptist. Anyways, Ben Foy's in the chat. It says, will it be like Transformers? I don't know what you mean by it. Will it be like Transformers, Decepticons and Autobots? If you just mean like whenever all the machines come to life because of the amplified electrical field in the atmosphere, then yeah, I imagine it'll be, the elements of the movie will be similar. Just keep in mind that the movie is cartoonified truth, okay? All the machines will turn on. None of the machines will work the way you want them to, okay? They'll just be doing their own thing. So some of them will be dangerous. Some of them will not be. So in that respect, I'd say yes. Zedrin Bing says, JayDreamerZ, what about the rotation of stars? It seems like some sort of programming or intelligence is controlling that rotation. I believe that the rotation of the stars is caused by the rotation of the plasma filament that is wrapped around the dome. It's spinning in one direction and one direction only. And when it passes through the dome and creates focal points, they will spin in the same direction. So will the sun and the moon. Chris, have a good night to you too. High five, Chris. See you later. Who else we got? Wizard of Oz says, when do you think these events will take place? Yes. That question sounds familiar to me. They will take place when the earth is ready to give birth. They will take place whenever we have reached a maximum pressure in this world, and when the electromagnetic field of the earth disappears. That is when. Now, your next question should be, well, how do we know when those things are nearby, right? You know by watching the omens. You will know by reading the earth and listening to, paying attention to yourself and the world around you. As you see the omens, the harbingers, the signs, the anomalies, the strange things, the fluctuations in this world increase until they're at their extreme point. And then you know it's right at your door. Wilfredo Jurado says, JayDreamerZ, what do you think about the Orion Belt and its significance to the pyramids? So I have a theory that like these beams of energy leave a mark possibly on the actual firmament, and that there's pyramids that are on the firmament. That's hard to explain. I'm getting a little tired right now, but that's my bad. It's possible that the energy erupts from the pyramids, from openings in the earth. Those beams reach all the way up to the firmament itself, and then the firmament reflects the light back down to us. So when we look up, where those three beams of light from the actual pyramids, because light comes up out of those pyramids or cavernous systems, we see it reflected above us. So we see the actual pyramids up there in the heavens, in the sky. And we see the light, which appear as stars, you know, reflected back down to us. So as above, so below. Let's see. Good to see you, Louis Love. Thank you for the compliment. And I think I'm going to wrap things up with that because that's it for today. I hope you guys got something of value out of the presentation. If you did, and you want to exchange value in return, visit my Patreon. Where did I put my Patreon link? Where is that? There it is, right over there. Patreon.com/JayDreamerZ, where you can jump into the chat and continue the conversation. You can share things, and you can check out some of my special videos I'm uploading, and other things too. It's a really cool place, and you know, it shows me some love, and I appreciate it. PayPal, direct donations. You can also send me a message if you send a PayPal donation, and I get that instantly and personally. So thank you guys for showing up today. Appreciate you. Leave me some comments, you know, and if you got further questions, work with one another in the comments section. I might pop into, but feel free to explore some of these ideas. And we haven't even scratched the surface, okay? When it comes to cosmology, like for example, I didn't even really talk about how Antarctica bows outward and upward. So people that go to the extreme south are actually starting to travel up the dome, and how that affects the sun's movement and how you would perceive that. All kinds of stuff. There's much more to be had and discussed, but I'm going to take off. So thanks for watching and hanging out. Until next time, I'm JayDreamerZ saying good vibes and goodbye.
Something's forcing me to stay. It'd be easier on me if I turned away to flee. But there's something holding on in the way it's being long gone. There's so many ways to escape, but I guess it's time to wake up, time to wake up. Find so many ways to escape, but I guess it's time to wake up, time to wake up.
so hard to fade away. But something's forcing me to stay. It'd be easier for me if I turn away to flee. But there's something holding on in the way of being long gone. There's so many ways to escape, but I guess it's time to wake up, time to wake up. Far too many ways to escape, but I guess it's time to wake up, time to wake up. Time to wake up, time to wake up.